This episode is brought to you by Set for Life Insurance. Listen, docs, one of the first steps we took to pay off our student loan debt was realizing we paid way too much for our disability insurance. That all changed when we found Set for Life Insurance. They helped us with a customized insurance policy that met our needs and, most of all, budget. To learn more, check out setforlifeinsurance.com. This episode is brought to you by Physician CEO. Finally, a business program for busy doctors just like you. Get the skills of branding, marketing, entrepreneurship, and combine those with your gifts as a physician. Be known as a doc outside the box and define your future. Learn more at physician-ceo.com/DOTB.
Welcome to Docs Outside the Box podcast. This is your official show, looking inside the minds of cutting-edge and innovative doctors. Think you'll find these stories in any medical textbook? Sorry. You're getting real life insight from men and women pushing the envelope beyond medicine. Ordinary doctors doing extraordinary things. Let's start now with your host, Dr. Nee Darko.
What's good, everyone? This is Dr. Nee and
Dr. Renee.
So you all have asked, written. I'm starting to feel a little bit slighted. I think everybody likes you. Now I know how President Barack Obama feels when people are like, look, we want First Lady Michelle. You know?
I wish I could be on that level, but I'm flattered regardless.
Yeah, but we got a lot of people writing in who say they want to hear more from you. They feel like it's a different vibe when you're on the show, which I definitely have to admit, it's more of a relaxed vibe on the show.
Oh, I like being on the show.
Yeah. So look, we're recording this on July 3rd. There's a lot of fireworks going on in the background. I can see on my sound standpoint, like my microphone is picking up a little bit of the background explosion. So don't be too alarmed. It's just fireworks that are going off in the background.
All right. So what are we here to talk about today, Dr. Nee?
So we are here to talk about, well, look, I think the whole concept of Docs Outside the Box is telling the stories of ordinary doctors doing extraordinary things. But, that really lays on a foundation of a couple of things, right? Entrepreneurship, being your own boss, not following what other people are doing, just taking the unbeaten path, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And us, like, there are a lot of different things that inspire us. There's a lot of different things that I like to watch or, that I pay attention to that, a lot of people don't really pay attention to in their own right. And how can we take that information from other things and drag that into our perspective, our lives as physicians? So recently I put you onto this video. We're from New York. So there's this famous radio station called Power 105. There's two famous hip hop stations in New York, Power 105, and probably the more popular one is Hot 97.
Hot 97.
Right? But Power 105
Hot
is a big time.
Every day, that's my word.
Right. A little bit of Puff Daddy. So Hot 97 is probably still the king, but a close second is Power 105. But where Power 105 definitely has Hot 97 is definitely in its on-air personalities and definitely the morning show. And the morning show that they have is something that's called The Breakfast Club. Actually, someone left a iTunes review saying that we're like the Breakfast Club for doctors.
What? Who's Charlemagne the God?
Shoot, that definitely ain't me. Or maybe it is.
Because if it's not you, that means it's me.
Right.
I do not think I'm Charlemagne the God.
Right. So it's hosted by three people: DJ MV, Charlemagne the God, Angela Yee. They've been hosting this show for over 10 years now. And basically, it's become a show that was talking mainly, to a hip hop culture. And it still does, talks to the hip hop culture. But it's become such a huge force that now, presidential candidates, people who are running for office stop by this show. And they make it a point to stop by this show to talk about their agenda, for everyone as well as for the culture. And I put that in quotes, right? Which has been really interesting. So every now and then, I watch this show, they video the show, and they have stuff on YouTube that you can watch, right? And you've seen some of these
I have
videos. They had one recently with the guy from Cash Money Records, Birdman. That's the one that everybody talks about. Put some spec on my name.
Right.
He put some spec on my name. He had everybody in there shook.
Spec on my name.
He had everybody shook. Charlemagne the God was shook. They were all scared. But the one that we're going to talk about on this episode is actually There's an episode with Jay-Z's old partner in crime, Dame Dash. And this interview occurred in 2015, so a little over 4 years ago. If anybody is familiar, Dame Dash used to be head of Roc-A-Fella Records. Right. So him and Jay-Z were kind of 1 and 2, in charge of Roc-A-Fella Records. Dame Dash is from Harlem. Jay-Z is from Brooklyn. They came together and formed like this amazing, duo of one person being an amazing rapper and the other person being an amazing businessman. And then obviously Dame Dash teaching all of the skills of being a businessman to Jay-Z. You see where Jay-Z's at right now.
Right.
He just crossed over and became the first billionaire hip-hop artist. Right. Which is pretty impressive considering when you look at everything that Jay-Z has in his portfolio to become a billionaire, literally only a very small amount is from the masters from his recording.
Right.
Most of his stuff is from real estate or other investments that we don't know anything about.
He's hip hop outside the box.
He's hip hop outside the box, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So yeah, you've seen this interview, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I've seen the Dame Dash video. And, when I saw the video, one of the things that I said to you was, you know what? You should do a show like paralleling what we just saw in this video to doctors and just this industry they call medicine. And so here we are recording this today. So.
Right. And before you discount this interview, this is actually, I'm going to put a link in the show notes. I'll put a YouTube video embed in the show notes so you can take a look. But this is actually a very powerful interview. I think there are a lot of things that you can get from this. So basically the whole premise of this is Dame Dash, he's on his own right now. He has a couple of people who he's bringing up in the music industry, but he's mainly making films. He's got a lot of money. He actually gave Lee Daniels a significant amount of money to put out the movie called Precious, which, won an award. I think it won an Oscar, or at least the supporting actress won an Oscar years ago.
Right.
He's still a heavy hitter in the industry. But this episode came out in 2015, and he came in talking about a new movie that he came out.
Right.
And, he came out talking about his new movie, and the conversation just went from straight.
It went totally left.
It went totally left. But it was, there's a lot of language in there, a lot of colorful language, but there's a lot of things that I think if you aren't paying attention, if you're just kind of looking for the fireworks, you're going to miss like the forest for the trees, because there's a lot of concepts that I think whether you are in business, whether you're employed, whether you're a physician, there's so many different nuggets that he was dropping in this show that, if you can really separate yourself from the funniness and the heated conversation, there's a lot of things that you can take from this.
Yeah, he's definitely a personality. Dame Dash is definitely a personality, and I just thought that there were some points that he made that I thought were really powerful. And then other points that I was like, this might be a little exaggerated, but I kind of see where he's coming from. So yeah, I think, after you listen to this podcast episode, you should definitely take the time out to watch the interview, because
NSFW. It's not safe for work, but
right,
definitely something when you're at home or you're working kids. Out. Right. But it's what's up. It's on point. Let's jump into it. How about that? Let's jump into it. So there's a point in the show where he's talking about his movie, and then they start talking about, a whole bunch of different things. The big thing is, why doesn't he have, or does he still have a relationship with Jay-Z, which apparently they have a strained relationship. What was the relationship like between Roc-A-Fella Records and Def Jam? So for people who don't know, Def Jam is the huge conglomerate music label or music company. And basically they had a partnership with Roc-A-Fella Records to help with distribution and so forth. So if you don't know, a lot of labels or a lot of companies, they're just not as big to get the distribution nationwide or even worldwide. So sometimes they will link up and partner with a larger company and just split the profits there, right? So that got brought up, like, what was that relationship like? And Charlemagne brought up something basically saying that he worked for Def Jam, and he snapped.
Yeah, Charlemagne said that Dame Dash worked for Def Jam, meaning he was employed by Def Jam.
And he didn't like that.
Yeah.
It led down the spiral of basically being your own boss. And Dame Dash basically was saying that he doesn't work for anybody. He's never had to work for anybody.
Right.
And he even said that having to call someone a boss or having to say that you work for someone. It's like calling someone daddy. That's the way how he says it, right? It's like calling someone daddy. You know what I mean? Right? I think that was a really important part because he actually, between him and DJ Envy and Charlamagne, that became a really heated convo because basically he was saying that he's never had to work for anyone before. He doesn't respect people who work for other people.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't respect employment in the sense that you actually go and get hired by someone and someone has to give you a paycheck, basically sustaining your lifestyle.
Right. The whole concept basically is ask another man for permission.
Right.
Or to sustain you, like you said. I agree with you there. Yo, DJ Envy got heated on that one.
He did because the conversation got very heated very quickly because, as you might have guessed by now, Charlamagne the God and DJ Envy, as well as Angela Yee, are all employed by this radio station. So to say that Dame Dash, for him to say that he doesn't respect people who are employed, basically, you have 3 people who are interviewing him that he's basically saying he doesn't have any respect for. And frankly, if you think about it, he's probably saying that he doesn't respect most people in the country, if not the world, for having been employed by someone, at least at some point in their lives.
Mm-hmm. I think what I really saw DJ Envy get really upset about was, I think the part that Dame Dash really talked about that really pissed him off was, I think DJ Envy, Charlamagne the God, and Angela Yee look at themselves as personalities.
Right.
And I think they look at themselves as outside of the realm of the radio station. Mm-hmm. Right. Because oftentimes they get interviewed on different news circuits. Obviously, they get invited to a whole bunch of different conferences. You know, all the things that go along with the event.
Yeah.
Right. But I think when Dame Dash came on and just started talking about I think it really brought them down. Mm-hmm. Right. To like, okay, as much as the heights that you guys are going to, as long as you don't have your own YouTube channel, you don't have your own, you don't have your own Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
You still have to ask for 3 weeks vacation. You still have to ask for permission to do X. You still have to ask for permission to do Y. And I think that's what really caused them to be really upset.
Yeah. I think it was a very quick reality check for them that, wow, like we are doing a lot of things, but we still have to ask permission. We still have to get some sort of approval from someone before we do the things that we do. And that's where, when I was watching that part of the interview, I thought, but doctors, right, who are employed, this is what happens. So we go to school, we do training, and we want to come out autonomous. And so, yeah, you can certainly make a decision as to whether or not you're going to write a prescription, for this particular patient. But guess what you can't do? You can't just decide you're going to pick up one day and then go on vacation. You have to ask permission from HR, from your chairperson, from, someone at the hospital if you are employed by that hospital. And so for me, that was a real reality check to be like, yeah, like that's kind of one of the things that we kind of, I guess, talked about, but not necessarily verbalized as caustically, if you will, as Dame Dash, that part of our why for trying to achieve financial independence is that we don't want to have to ask permission for things, that we want to be able to go on vacation whenever we want and do the things that we want to do, with our son. Yeah. So that for me was really jarring.
You kind of feel it in the gut below too. You're like, wait, I put in all these years of medical school.
Yeah.
I'm putting all this debt. And then literally, I'm just relegated to just being literally just an employee. Mm-hmm. As much as you want to look at it as, I'm a physician, I'm a part of this team, I may lead this team. To be honest, it boils down to I'm an employee and I have to ask for permission. I have to ask for X, Y, and Z. Now, that leads me to my second point, which I think would really help us all really understand kind of the physician-hospital relationship, which is, you're not the boss unless you put up your own money. That was his next point.
Yeah.
Right? You're not the boss unless you put up your own money. So basically what he was saying to them is, as much as you guys want to say you all are personalities, you are all, doing all of these great things, outside of this radio station, you really are just employees and you can't just call off. You have to ask someone to call off, right? You have to get permission to call off, right? You have to get permission to get vacation. Like, you're not putting up these microphones. You're not putting up the studio. That's all put up by someone else.
Right. And you just don't own anything, to which DJ Envy said
he
to
owns
Dame Dash,
stocks.
he owns stocks in the
To which Dame Dash was like, well, can you pass that along to your son?
right.
Right. To some extent you can.
Stocks, you could.
You could pass along stocks. But what Dame Dash was saying is, if you're not putting up your own money for anything, then you can't be the boss.
Right.
And he likened it to, look, can you tell your son to come in here and you just give him a job?
Right.
Right. And there was a pause there.
Right.
Right.
And DJ Envy's answer eventually was no. I mean, he could advocate for his son to get a job there, but he'd be advocating to the bosses. And at the end of the day, DJ Envy could not make the final decision to say, yes, my son could work here. And so that's where Dame Dash was like, well, you're employed. You have to ask permission. In other words, he said, you can't pass this radio station on to your son. That's not your name on the wall. And that's where it was. I mean, the conversation really got heated.
Yeah, it got real heated. It got really heated because basically, Dame Dash takes a very different approach to things.
Yeah.
And he's very abrasive with his conversations.
Very matter of fact.
Very matter of fact, but to more extent, abrasive about it. And it can piss you off if you're not very confident in how you operate in your life. So basically, like you said, I think what he was just saying is, you have a job. Basically, you have a boss. So you're like calling them daddy. And then the other thing that he said is look, he's working for his last name, not his first name.
Correct.
Right, which is huge. So what Dame Dash is saying that he's not working for Dame or Damon, he's working for the Dash name.
Right.
Right.
Which
and
is
basically
his
what
children.
he's saying that is, he's working for his children for that generational wealth. And from a DJ Envy, Charlamagne, what he's saying from their perspective, or anybody's employed, that look, you're not working hard enough for your last name.
Yeah, you're working for someone else's last name.
You're working for someone else's last name and you're working for your first name, basically. Right. I thought that was pretty harsh, right? Because I think what DJ Envy rebutted back by saying is that, look, so you mean to tell me anybody who's just starting to work, even to work their way up to the point where they become independent, you don't respect that? And Dame Dash was kind of like, no.
Yeah.
I thought that was really harsh.
I think that's extreme.
Yeah.
Not just harsh, but I think it is extreme because I think that there is value in employment and in learning, how things work. And we know that there are lots of entrepreneurs out there who did start out working for someone and learned how their employees or their employers' systems worked and figured out a better way to do it and actually became a competitor of their own employer. So we know that that's out there. And so I think that there is still honor in being employed. But at the same time, the question becomes, okay, well, if that's all you are is employed, then is there something to be said about not actually having your own? And that was my question is like, wow, there are a lot of people out there who are employed who will retire, who will pass on, but will never have anything that they can pass on to their children. So does he have at least some sort of a point? And I thought about just the many physicians who are out there who are employed, who are only employed and don't necessarily have a side hustle, don't necessarily have something else that they do or own on their own. What are they passing on to their children? Because you can't come in and say, hey, I want my daughter to come in and work here as a OB.
Right.
So,
and this is not to beat up on people who are employed, but this is just to kind of give a wake-up call and let people start thinking about things from a different perspective because this was such a jarring conversation. You're just like, oh, I didn't really think about it that way.
Yeah.
For example, you go to school for all those years. We're talking about 13 years, maybe even longer if you're like in a field like plastic surgery, cardiothoracic surgery.
Neuro, yep.
You have all this intellectual capital, right? You're not putting up the money to build a hospital or to build something related to the healthcare industry, but you have this intellectual capital that nobody else really has except, your other colleagues.
Right.
You have sweat equity in terms of your time, all this work, but you're not the boss because you're not putting up the money.
Right.
And I know that you mentioned there was a story.
Yeah, I was on a Facebook thread at one point and, obviously this is becoming a hot topic, right? The whole, how do we function in terms of administration? And one of the threads that I was on, there was a physician who was upset because he or she, I can't remember, let's say she was working in an office, a hospital employed office, and the hospital was hiring a new office manager. Well, they hired the new office manager and didn't even bother to consult the doctor. And so they took this office manager and put her in the office. And so now the doctor was complaining. But the reality is, and I responded, I said, but you're not the boss. This is the problem, right? Because oftentimes we think because we're the doctor that we're the boss, when in reality, believe it or not, many of us as physicians, hospital employed physicians working in an office setting are oftentimes accountable to the office manager, right? We're actually accountable to someone who has way less education than we do. We are evaluated by that person.
This is a good point. Yeah.
And so it's like, you're not the boss. Technically, there's a very big likelihood that this person is now, in a way, some sort of pseudo supervisor over you. This person dictates how many patients you will see. This person dictates when you're going to be in the office. This person is basically dictating what your workday will look like. You're not the boss. And so I think my comment was well taken with some people and not so much with others.
Well, I think because it's a shocking thing to people to be like, what do you mean I'm not the boss? It's like,
but you're not.
And now a word from our sponsor. Meet Dr. Arthur Cummings. He's a busy ophthalmologist practicing all the way in Dublin, Ireland. Recently, he finished Physician CEO. Check out what got him to jump on the transatlantic flight to participate in this program.
My initial response would simply be, just do it. This is one of those programs that is so good. It's very likely to be the best education you've ever received. And you realize then as a physician how little we really know about our businesses, even though we're running businesses that are quite large. And the level of training is so fantastic. The education is so good. The faculty is immaculate. And you're in a group of people who are like-minded. So just the entire environment is an amazing learning experience and really a good incubator for growing your practice.
So if you're a physician who's looking to start your own venture or even lead your practice or department, then you can't afford to miss this opportunity. Class is filling up. Learn more at physician-ceo.com/DOTB. I mean, here's my example. Like, the biggest thing for me that made me go towards locums was as soon as I finished fellowship, I did do locums.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that people get scared of is like, well, you don't have any mentors, which is true. And you don't,
That's not necessarily true.
That's not necessarily true, but that's the fear that most people have.
Right.
Did I have mentors at specific hospitals? No, but there was always someone I could call at previous, attendings who I could ask questions to. The big thing that I had a major problem with once I became employed was, once I became employed, I became part of a trauma department. The thing that frustrated me was there were times where I felt like, my decision on healthcare for my patient sometimes will get usurped by what the trauma director or what someone else would say. And it's like, wait, hold on a second.
Right.
This is my patient. I'm running the ship. I may ask you for advice, but I'm not asking for you to have the final say.
Right.
And oftentimes I've seen that in medicine, and I've seen it in my own experience where people say, well, no, it's my decision. Like, no, that's not your decision, because although it's your decision, you're making a final decision. If something goes wrong, I'm the attending.
Yeah.
So you mean to tell me that you're going to come to court? I'm taking it to an extreme, but
of course.
You're going to come to court and I'm going to say, well, I deferred to this guy, but doctor, your name is on the...
Exactly.
So those are things that I've really found to be really frustrating. It's like, well, from a clinical standpoint, you're teaching me to be, autonomous.
Autonomous,
But there are ways in which if I'm part of this system, like you're taking over control clinically, and I didn't like that. So that was one of the reasons that kind of pushed me out and just said, I think it's better for me to kind of just do this on my own. Now that's just from a clinical perspective, and that's from a physician to physician type of interaction. But obviously from a physician to institution standpoint, you can go within the realms of antibiotics to use, or how quickly should you be kicking people out. Someone contacts, you admit a patient, and then next a day later, someone from social work or someone from coding is calling you, hey, does this patient need to be inpatient status?
Right.
Like, what do you mean? Wait, what?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, we've all encountered it, right? You're doing your rounds and next, someone from case management is on the floor. Hey, doctor, I saw that you have this patient here. We think she should go home today. And I'm like, really, doctor? Oh, wait, you're not a doctor. And so these are the frustrations that we deal with as physicians that I think anyway parallel the conversation between Dame Dash and the Breakfast Club, because he's basically saying, look, you can't even make your own decisions. For example, if the executives at the Breakfast Club decided that they didn't even want Dame Dash on the show, they could basically veto anything that Envy, Charlemagne, or Angela Yee wanted. So you don't actually run the show. You're the personality, but you don't run the show. You're the talent, but you don't run the show. And for me, that is a very big parallel to what physicians experience. We are the talent, but in many ways, we don't run the show. You know, that's a little bothersome to me.
A little.
It's a lot bothersome to me as a physician. And I think it should be a lot more bothersome to physicians out there. I don't know if it is. If it is, definitely tag me. Don't tag me.
You're going to get me in trouble.
Tag Dr. Nee, okay?
That's fine. I always get in trouble anyway with the audience. It's all good. I can take it. That's Dr. Volney at...
No.
Well, the next point that he talked about, and you kind of spoke about it, is basically what can you pass on to your children if you're working for someone? That is what pissed off people there, because I'm sure they're making great salaries.
Right.
You know, the key thing is salaries. But what Dame Dash brought in, he brought in some cookies.
Yes,
right? For them to have some cookies.
Yes.
And these cookies were actually made by Dame Dash's son.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He made the recipe, figured out a way to get them.
His adult son at this point.
His adult son, get them mass produced, and is making money off of that.
Right.
So basically he has taught his son how to create something that people will buy and to, you know, get some income from it. That went down a different route.
Yeah.
That went down a different route, you know.
I mean, I think Dame Dash is really, you know, kind of like you said, he's focusing on the Dash, right? The Dash name. He's really focused on legacy and building that generational wealth, right? He's working not for himself. He's working for his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren. He's really working, you know, so that his name will forever be. I think there's something to be said for that. I do think, like I said, he goes a little bit to the extreme to say that, you know, if you've ever been employed, that, you know, there's no honor in that. I don't believe that. But I do think, at least in medicine, we often seem to see ourselves as one-trick ponies, right? I'm a doctor. Like, what are you? I'm a doctor. And it's like, is that all you really are?
Well, back in the day, that was a big deal.
Yes.
That was really, that was a really big deal.
Very high regard. But the system was different, right? The system is not the same, right? And the system has evolved. And I don't necessarily know that people's perspective in medicine, that physicians specifically in medicine, I think that it is evolving, but I think that the system has evolved much faster than our own perspectives as physicians. And so I think that even if physicians are employed, like you've had so many people on your show who either are still employed or were employed, but still were able to create something of their own. And I think there's something to be said about that. I think there is a different mindset to those doctors who think outside the box, no pun intended. But I think there's something to be said about that. And I think that's where his point actually becomes very, very poignant, that even if you are employed, you can still teach your child how to work for themselves and work for their last name, work for your last name. You could still work for your last name. And I think that that's something that, you know, you and I, we try to do, right? Especially now that we've kind of dropped employment. You know, we've gone to independent contracting. We've done, you know, several side hustle ventures, and we're looking to do more, you know, in order to create some sort of wealth and financial independence.
First of all, shout out to the side hustle crew, like
Yes.
physicians. I mean, for me, I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many doctors out there. I mean, I don't know how many Facebook groups you're a part of, but I'm a part of a lot of Facebook groups. And that's why I said it's evolving now. Like you're seeing doctors not being afraid to say that they're not just doctors. Hashtag, I'm not just a doc.
Right. That's what I'm saying. You know, it's true. Like, you know, what becomes a true asset, right? Like you becoming a physician and just working, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you own that? Like that degree dies with you, but what will be like your legacy, I guess, right? And that could be your name, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Or does it go down with, and I think the new generation, the millennials, definitely, the millennials have been pushing a lot of this stuff. You know, the big thing is, you know, this side hustle nature. Can I build a business on the side that, you know, I won't have to be so chained to the hospital or to the clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And then with this business, this is something that will, you know, take me into a different direction. And is this something that I can pass on to my children and things like that? Well, at least I think the last point that he made overall, and these are all overarching goals, everyone. Like these are topics, right? He talked about so many different things, but I tried to kind of parse down, you know, what are the specific topics that kind of outline everything that he was talking about. The last thing was gossip.
Yeah.
Was gossip, which he was calling Charlemagne, you know, what is it? Chatty Cathy.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a lot of, you know, well, I heard, you know, from Def Jam that X, Y, and Z, or you didn't like Jay-Z because of X, Y, and Z, or, you know, all these different things.
Yeah.
And
rumors.
That actually got Dame Dash heated because he's like, look, if you can't tell me exactly who said it, when they said it, I don't want to hear it. Because I don't want to gossip. I don't like to gossip. And he kind of went down a certain path with it that, you know, I thought wasn't necessary and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But he was basically saying, you know, the whole concept is not being supportive of each other, right? That's what he's talking about. Why aren't we being more supportive of each other instead of talking behind each other's back, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about, you know, specifically how, I don't know if you all remember, if you all are listening, there's a movie that came out several years ago. I think, over 10 years ago. It's a movie called Precious.
Mm-hmm.
Came out and it won some awards. I think she won Best Supporting Actress, I believe, in that movie. But that movie was a great story, but unfortunately, it just could not raise enough money or would not get enough money from, you know, the big execs or the big money ad agencies or what have you to be put out there to be made.
Mm-hmm.
So Dame Dash actually gave the director, Lee Daniels, at the time, over $2 million.
Right.
And then he actually took money from different people. And there was like this promise that he would get the money back and not only get the money back, maybe even more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, fast forward, we all know Precious was a huge success.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it started the career or launched the career of Lee Daniels. He's done future movies that have, you know, exploded and he never got his money back. Or Dame Dash never got his money back.
Yeah.
But basically, there's like this gossiping that he does not like. And I liken that to, I don't know specifically if doctors are gossiping about each other, but there's this, I feel at times there's this lack of support. I guess even gossiping too, like this kind of uppityness. If someone gets too uppity, if someone decides to leave someplace or if someone decides to speak up where others won't speak up, there's this like, who do you think you are?
Right.
You know, as opposed to like, yeah, you're right. What you're saying doesn't make sense. The system is effed up. Let's all get together and work together in a way to kind of change it.
Yeah, doctors are not ready for that.
Yeah, right?
Doctors are not ready. They're just not. I think there is, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the sense of commitment to the community that makes doctors think that they have to be like either or, right? Like either you're committed to whatever hospital community that you're in or you're against it. And it's like, you know, you can navigate this in a very different way. I don't know also if it's like a safety issue, you know, if doctors feel like, you know, there's some sort of job security that there is in working for other people, working for a hospital. And you know me, how I feel about employment and saying that it's job security. You know me, I'm just like, actually, the only job security is the one you create for yourself.
Right. I agree with you there. And I think a lot of people are starting to realize that now, like even having a W-2 job is not secure.
It's not job security. Absolutely not. Because the hospital will literally fire you or quote unquote, we're not renewing your contract, but we're not going to call it firing. And they basically will have no qualms walking you out on the last day with security. So there's your job security right there. Your job security is the security officer walking you out with a little box in your hand.
I've seen it with someone who even had a contract, you know, and, you know, they just got fired.
Yeah.
And there was no, you know, 2 weeks, 6 weeks or 6 months or what have you. It was just we don't need you anymore. And this is another physician. leave immediately.
Oh, yeah.
And you're done. I was pretty shocked about that.
Yeah. I know someone very recently who just got their contract was not renewed. It was how the hospital put it. And it's like, so you're firing me. No. We're not firing you. We're just not renewing your contract. It's like, well, I had no intention on leaving. But that's what they told, this physician. But yeah, I think there is a level of non-support, maybe even to the level of gossip that we just kind of...
Yeah, Doc, stop being chatty Cathy.
Yeah, just stop being chatty
Start supporting
Cathy.
each other, yo.
Yeah, and start supporting each other. I think we would get so much further if doctors just band together and to advocate for, literally at this point, for our lives, because we know that there are a lot of doctors who are unhappy out there, that they're either leaving medicine altogether or they're unfortunately taking their own lives.
Yeah. And let's talk more about that because, you'll see like other doctors come at other doctors for maybe wanting a weekend off or needing to take some time off.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes some doctors aren't really savvy, aren't really able to kind of verbalize that, listen, I need to have this time off because something is going on. So they may not be able to verbalize that, but just are able to say or admit, and they just start saying, look, I need a weekend off, or, I need to be there for their kids.
Right.
And oftentimes the other doctors, and I get it, it really is the system that's causing people to act like this. We're all overworked, we're busy. And then when you find out that your colleague, your partner in crime, needs to take some time off, all that really means to you and relates to you is, I got to work
more.
I got to work more. And I understand that. And that's going to be frustrating. And it's a bitch.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No, it really is. It really is.
It's a pain in the ass. And now, like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
But oftentimes, like, the first person that we're upset at is
the doctor who's asking for the time off.
Right.
Which
could be us one day, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I read an article once about a physician who unfortunately took his own life, and even his patients were angry at him for taking his own life. Like they were writing, I guess, reviews that, I can't believe he did that because I need this and I need that. And it's like, wow, like, are we so self-centered at this point that we can't even empathize with someone who took his own life? Like, we can't take a moment to think about potentially all of the hurt, the sadness, the disappointment that this person had in their lives. So yeah, I just think that we need to band together and
we need to fight the power.
We need to fight the power.
Fight the power that be.
And look, I'm not saying that, doctors are a uniform, homogeneous group. We're not. There are going to be things that, we disagree on. There are going to be certain things that work for some people, certain things that don't work for others. For me, I'm a huge proponent of independent contracting for physicians. So if you want to work at a hospital, but not for a hospital, I'm a huge proponent of that. Again, I was on a Facebook thread where, I basically said that I'm a huge proponent of that. And there was someone who disagreed. Why? Because she had health issues.
That's what I was about to say. There are some people who are listening to this and just like, yeah, easy for you to say.
Right.
Because there are people who have health issues and they can't get health insurance, disability insurance, or life insurance unless they're employed.
Yeah.
So this excludes, obviously, look.
There's always going to be an exception to the rule.
There's always going to be an exception to the rule.
Yeah.
For those who are in those situations, my heart goes out to you. Keep grinding. Keep rocking.
Right.
We got your back on that one. And I would definitely say to those people who are just like, well, why are they beating on us employed doctors? Like, we're not beating up on you all.
Not at all.
All we're just saying is just kind of look at things from a different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I oftentimes say, even just being an independent contractor is not for everybody. Some people have people that they need to take care of, people who are dependent on them, and maybe where they live is a very dense area. And as a result, 1099s just aren't attractive, right? Like New York City.
Yeah,
right.
I would never 1099 in New York City.
Right. Or it'd be very difficult to do so because someone would be willing to take your position just like that.
Right. Plus the rates are lower. And so it wouldn't be sustainable anyway.
Right. I got you there. So, being able to do that might be really difficult. So traveling could cause, a significant strain on family.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying is it doesn't mean that you can't look at, being an employed physician with like an end goal in mind, right? Like maybe you're trying to reach a certain savings point, or maybe you are trying to use that to fund something else, real estate or what have you. All I'm saying is that maybe you should think about that also. It's just try not to just look at yourself as this lifelong person who's going to work at this hospital. But what exactly is the end goal? When do you get off the track, so to speak?
Exactly. Yeah. Because I think I said this earlier that, yeah, you could be an employed physician, but is there something else potentially that you could do on the side? What other talents do you have that you can leverage? I don't know everyone's situation. Obviously, sometimes it's easier for some people than others. Depends on your family construct, depends on your own physical ability. But if you've never thought about it before, I think with this episode, my whole impetus behind this episode was to basically ask you to think about it now. Just think about it. What else could you possibly be? What else could you possibly do? And that doesn't necessarily mean not being employed, but certainly you might find that you're so good at something else that you don't necessarily have to be employed. That opportunity that you weren't taking becomes something that really soars and, you become much more lucrative, much more fulfilled in that venture.
Or let me just take it from Gary V's perspective, just having some self-awareness and realizing that maybe you can support, your fellow colleague in something, right?
Yeah.
And if you see that they're struggling, be there for that person. Because sometimes people can be depressed or people can show that they need help, but not verbalize it. But you can see it in various different ways.
Right.
Them showing up late for work or them, you see that they're like lashing out at people. These could be just subtle signs that they're not having a very easy time. And we can do a better job of being there for that person as opposed to talking behind their back. So let's kind of circle and wrap this up and kind of take a 30,000 view from this. So for me, what I got from this is the one thing I just didn't like about Dame Dash's perspective is I think he's very transactional about his view on things, which I think depending on how you look at things, having a transactional mentality can be very beneficial in some ways. But I think from an emotional standpoint, or I think from a relationship standpoint, can be very difficult also.
Yeah.
So I found that to be really interesting. But that's the best way that I could describe his mentality. It's extremely transactional.
Yeah.
There's not many emotions that are involved in his thought process. And as a matter of fact, anything that's related to emotions, he does not like.
Right.
The question is, should you be like that?
Should you be transactional? I think that there are some instances, like you said, when you have to be transactional. For example, when a physician approaches a hospital for employment, I think that's the point at which you become transactional, right?
Absolutely.
Because the hospital is being nothing but transactional. What they do is they put forward the people with whom you will be working, right, as kind of the front line people that you're going to see, so that you can form relationships and see how people, work. And yes, this person is nice and things like that. But the reality is that the people who you meet at the interview are not the people who are making the final decision oftentimes, right?
Well, if you're talking about from a clinical perspective.
Yeah, I'm talking about I'm just talking about from the employment perspective, right? Because at the end of the day, those people have behind them or even above them, right? Who? The administrators, the lawyers, right? And so that's where the transaction actually occurs. The transaction actually occurs at the administrative level with the attorneys and the administrators. Why? Because those are the people who put out the contract. So you'll have instances where the chair of the department doesn't even know how much one of his or her physicians is making, right? Because they're not privy to that person's contract.
They don't even know the conditions.
No, they don't know the conditions.
How they should work.
Absolutely. Right? So that's where it becomes transactional because, see, they put forth, again, the people with whom you'll be working so that you can form that emotional bond with them, right? Like you remember when you interviewed, right? You start working with people and you're like, oh, this person's cool. He's down to earth or he's very experienced. I can work with him or he's a good operator, this, that, and the other, blah, blah, blah. That's where they want you to be, okay? But when the transaction occurs, you have to shift. You actually have to shift your mind to, okay, I can't be tied to the people with whom I'm going to work alone. That's important. Don't get me wrong. But at some point, I've got to become very transactional. I've got to read this contract from back to front, every single page. I should get an attorney.
Shout out to Dr. Bonnie, who's teaching that stuff.
Dr. Bonnie is very good at
Dr. Bonnie with beyondtheexamroom.co.
Yep.
Make sure you check her out at beyondtheexamroom.co.
Mm-hmm. So Dr. Bonnie is very good with this. But, you have to be very transactional. What happens is doctors get tied. What do they get tied to? They get tied to the doctors that they're going to work with. They get tied to, the resources at the hospital. They get tied to the houses that the real estate agent took them out to see, right? This is all emotional. This is very, very, very transactional on the parts of the administrators. They want you to have an emotional attachment to this area, to this hospital, so that when it comes time to sign your contract, right, everything else kind of goes out the window. And you and I have seen this, where doctors have knowingly signed contracts that they knew was not good, or that they went against their own attorneys and signed the contract.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
On an emotional decision.
Which is interesting, right? Because doctors are very scientific.
Yes. It's very ironic.
Oftentimes people say, like, how is it that you're able to, if a death occurs or what have you, like, we can just kind of move on because we have this barrier. But when it comes down to certain things, we're still very emotional about it. And I think hospitals know exactly how to play on those things.
They pull on our heartstrings. So I think being transactional is very necessary in some circumstances. But I do think that Dame Dash takes it, at least from what I saw in the interview. I don't know him personally, so I can't say. But at least from what I saw in the interview, I think he takes it to some sort of an extreme. However, I will say, the fact that he brought his son's cookies and, that he talks about having this generational wealth and working for his grandchildren and his great-grandchildren, that does tell me that he has some emotional side to him.
I think so. I think it's really important for him to have a powerful situation and, no pressure on. But if anybody knows, like, I'm trying to get Dr. Jess on the show, Dr. Jessica Clemens. She's a psychiatrist in New York City, definitely a doc outside the box, but she interviewed Dame Dash. And one of the things that they talked about was at a very young age, he felt as though he didn't have power. And he said to himself that he never would want to have that feeling again. And because of that, he was very calculated in the steps that he took to make sure that he never felt like that again. Now, he probably overcompensated for that, but he's extremely successful, even to this day right now.
So it works.
Right. It works. It works to an extent. So I think overall, everyone, I know that this is going to be a controversial episode. That's what we want. You know what I'm saying? We want people to listen to this episode and really kind of think about things. If you know someone who's an independent contractor, or if you know someone who is employed, share this episode with them.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get the conversation started. Because I think the biggest thing is we need to get out of these silos, right? Where one group is talking about another thing, or one person is talking about one thing and someone else is talking about something completely different. Let's all have this conversation, and there are a lot of different places that are not related to medicine that we can get a lot of interesting lessons from. So I think the next episode that we're going to do together, we're going to be talking about MBA free agency.
Oh, yeah.
This is going to be a good one. So the next episode will be MBA free agency and the lessons that doctors can learn from that. Yeah. That's going to be hot also.
Yeah. I think, this is certainly docs outside the box, but I think that, docs talking about topics outside of the box of just kind of the regular topic of medicine, I think is really important as well. So I think this topic and the next topic are definitely going to be outside the box for docs to talk about. So I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. So thanks for being on the show, Dr. Renee.
No problem, Dr. Nee. It'll only cost you about $100 per word.
All right, whatever. But everyone, thank you for listening to this episode of Docs Outside the Box. Remember, share this with other people. Always the best way to let us know what you think about this episode is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. It takes about a minute or so. just go on Apple Podcasts, leave the show a 5-star review or whatever you think the show deserves, and then leave a little bit of some constructive criticism, and that allows the show to grow. That also allows, through all the different algorithms, it allows the show to be that much more visible to new users, new listeners, all right? So look, we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.